Hello, everyone. My name is Adrian Lopazan. I'm a security cloud solutions architect working at Microsoft for the last 7 years, almost 8 years now. Main focus was security and identity, and I'm here today to talk to you about security, specifically about zero trust. You may have heard about zero trust before, but today I'm attempting to explore with you a little more about what it is, what it does, and why it's important for everyone. So just to get organized a little bit, if you have any questions, please post them on the chat window. I will check that regularly as we go through the content. If you do have a question, please feel free to raise your hand in Teams, and then I'll stop and you can ask your question, and we'll get started.
I'll help monitor the chat and the hand raising, Adrian, too, for you. So.
Okay, sounds good. Actually, that's better because I have two screens here. I'm presenting on one, and want to keep an eye on this screen as well. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to get started. So what is zero trust? It's not a technology, it's a modern security approach which treats every access attempt like it's coming from an untrusted network. So as we used to be familiar with the concept of a firewall on the on-premises topologies, this approach no longer relies on trusting the corporate network, or not entirely for that matter, and it's very relevant to our current world we live in today. We'll explore more on this in the next couple of slides. So, digital transformation. You have heard about this concept before, and I'm sure you are very familiar, somehow familiar with the digital transformation concept. And a typical roadmap looked like spanning across a year or two, depending on the organization size and complexity, starting with scoping, budgeting, evaluating learning needs, so on and so forth, then pilots, and of course then getting ready to deploy in production. So due to COVID, this timeline has shrunk from 2 years to 2 months. And for that, customers had to accelerate everything. Obviously, security was top of mind, and given the circumstances, they have to take action quick. We've seen customers deploying conditional access very quickly, as opposed to before when there were more hesitation or delays or different blockers. Now with this urgency to prepare for remote work, then obviously security being top of mind, they're looking at how they can quickly start protecting their users and assets. We used to look at users just as our employees. They were sitting at their desk, coming into work, doing their work, leaving, so on and so forth. We had or still have corporate managed devices, on-premises apps only accessible through either a VPN or being located on the actual premises. Simple monolithic apps, no complexity there, everything protected by a corporate firewall. And then we had some local packet tracing, log analysis, and tools to look at what's going on there. Reality today, and for some time, is that we have different type of users now: employees, partners, customers, both bots, services that can run on their own, on schedules, and so on and so forth. We have different variety of devices. Bring your own device is the initiative, right? Everyone would like to implement because it saves cost. The addition of IoT devices also increase complexity, explosion of cloud applications, the need to access them from everywhere. Complexity of the apps also has increased. APIs are easily accessible today, and so on and so forth. And with that, of course, we expanded the perimeter where we can all work from. Home or hotel rooms, or any location where we have internet access. The main three principles of this zero trust are to verify explicitly, use least privilege access to resources, and always assume breach. Even before these unprecedented times, we knew that we could no longer trust or rely on everything behind the corporate firewall. So now more than ever, we need to think about, or customers need to think about, moving to zero trust, adopting this strategy to obviously safeguard the company resources. And what does it mean to verify explicitly? Means always authenticate and authorize based on who the user is, where they're coming from, and which device they're coming from as well, and what data and applications they're trying to access. So there are multiple layers at which this access is verified. Then once they get access, we have to apply the least privilege access to limit their access into what they're supposed to do, or what they can do. And for that, we're going to leverage just in time or just enough access. And we're going to see what technologies we have with our services. And of course, applying different policies to this type of privileges. On the other hand, assuming breach is leveraging analytics and, of course, cloud intelligence, threat intelligence to minimize the blast radius and prevent lateral movement, and ensure that bad actors do not have easy access or no access at all to the data by encrypting end-to-end communications as well. Are there any questions so far? All right, moving on, zero trust architecture. So with the zero trust approach, we should think about extending our secure approach to the entire digital estate, not just part of it. Organizations do need to implement zero trust controls and technologies across all these foundational elements, starting with identities, devices, data, infrastructure, apps, and network. Today's session will focus on the securing identities, but we will need to take an approach by looking at all these aspects. Of course, starting with identity is something we need to think about because they are the entry point, if you will, to accessing all the other resources. So how do we do this? For identities, leveraging multifactor authentication, user risk, session risk, as well with identity protection service in Azure AD. Then looking at devices, where we evaluate the risk state of this device, typically enrolled in an MDM, where MDM evaluates this state is communicated back to the identity protection engine for alerting, notifications, and be subjected to policies. On the data side, classifying, labeling, encrypting data, Azure Information Protection or Microsoft Information Protection, which is a suite of application and tools and processes that let you achieve these goals. Adaptive access to applications built into endpoint protection solutions, as well integrated with other cloud security tools like Security Center. Looking at access and runtime control on the side of the infrastructure and network side, leveraging their different threat protection mechanisms or implementing secure solutions like firewalls or data inspection gateways and so on and so forth. All right, so as I mentioned, today's discussion is around securing your identity infrastructure. And we're gonna get started talking about the 5 steps that we should take to strengthen or build a strong identity foundation. One is strengthened credentials, reducing attack surface, automating threat response, utilizing cloud intelligence, and empowering users with self-service. We're going to go through each of these sequentially. We're going to start with a strong identity foundation on strengthening credentials. Some statistics we need to be aware of. There are many organizations leveraging Azure AD today. Many users signing in daily, and of course that is resultant in many daily authentication requests. So it's a large volume of data that is processed, looked at, analyzed, and various indicators are provided back to these services like identity protection to determine the risk level for each user. Single sign-on is obviously something we'd like to achieve. So meaning that we sign in once and then we get access to other resources without being re-authenticated again. But that also implies that we need to ensure that subsequent authentications are also secure, even if we are not interactively asking users to authenticate. The deployment of or an integration between an on-premises organization and the cloud starts with synchronizing identities using Azure AD Connect. Then single sign-on is built into the platform, as well as integrating on-premises only applications that cannot be migrated to the cloud for the time being by leveraging our proxy, Azure AD application proxy, or integration with other vendors like Citrix, F5, or Zscaler, for instance. It has been determined statistically by many organizations and researchers that in the past year or so, if not even longer, there was about 230% increase in password spray attack. For those of you that do not know what that is, it's basically attackers leveraging a technique to go undetected and not triggering, of course, account lockouts. So they are trying to guess your password by spraying several different passwords for a longer period of time. So as I mentioned, account lockout is not triggered and they will look legitimate. Now, today we have built-in Azure AD to detect this kind of behaviors when this attacks happens. And that's actually one of the detections that's built into identity protection now. And also, nearly 1 in 3 of all attacks on enterprise involve phishing. This is a common technique that attackers trigger users into clicking on links and providing their credentials on these sites that look very legitimate. There are many investments and solutions and focus on email, of course, because these phishing attacks are mainly via email, to protect users from clicking on these links or notifying them that this may be a potential malicious website you're accessing by clicking on that link. 9 million high-risk enterprises sign-in attempts flagged in August 2010. It's a little old, but the number has been increased since then. 2 million compromised accounts detected, and 5.8 billion at the time attackers-driven sign-in detections. These numbers, as we all know, if we look at media announcements, blogs, LinkedIn, everywhere you are sourcing your information, you'll see that the attacks have increased specifically or since the pandemic has started as well. So how do we verify identities? By using or with strong authentication. By using technologies like passwordless, leveraging Microsoft Authenticator, Windows Hello for Business, FIDO keys, and biometric. Also, leveraging push notifications, software hard tokens, or SMS is another factor or another way of increasing the strong authentication other than just using the password. And on the next slide, we're going to see them compared side by side. Passwords, using them just alone is not a very good idea because they are prone to be stolen or revealed through phishing campaigns. And also, one of the habits users have is to reuse the same password across many services they use, including personal accounts, and also trying to reduce their complexity so they can remember them. Adding additional form of authentication, as we all know, with MFA, by sending an SMS code that we can leverage to provide that additional information to prove that we are who we say we are, or a phone call, eventually with the PIN to confirm authenticity, push notifications, software tokens, hardware tokens, or even better, they're leveraging passwords and SMS and voice. And of course, the best is Windows Hello for Business with supported devices, leveraging FIDO keys and Microsoft Authenticator. One important aspect of strengthening security or identity is to block legacy authentication. Legacy authentication, for those of you that are not familiar with it, or what is our terminology around legacy authentication, is authentication methods that were leveraged before. Examples are signing in with clear username and password. In some cases, that was encrypted. POP3, IMAP, SMTP clients, around email messaging particularly. There was some dependencies on the SharePoint online from a legacy authentication perspective, but that wasn't as common as or as widely used as email is, or protocols rather used to access these services. So this is a very important aspect of protecting, and the reason for that is because most of the attacks are coming through these legacy protocols. All right, so what do? We enable MFA for all administrators as soon as possible if you haven't done yet. Deploy strong authentication for all users. We saw on the previous slides what those are. Migrating from username to leveraging the best options out there with Windows Hello for Business, FIDO tokens, or Authenticator app. Thinking about starting the passwordless journey. Speaking about passwordless supportability, there was a recent announcement that the Microsoft accounts, your personal accounts at Outlook.com or Hotmail, you have now the ability to disable the password. Obviously, if you have signed up for stronger authentication credentials, like using the Authenticator, for instance, or even FIDO keys you can use with the consumer platform. But now you have the ability to go and disable it altogether. So you and, of course, attackers specifically won't be able to leverage your password even if they have possession of it and sign in. And, of course, blocking legacy authentication. Any questions so far before we move on and talk about reducing the attack surface?
I have a general one. So the passwordless journey, is there mechanisms for recovering your account if you say like lose your device that's letting you in? So your FIDO key, say, gets crushed, stolen, broken. How do you recover that?
So the way you can do it is by having multiple ways of, and this is what I've done with my personal accounts. I have two means of authentication. One is actually three. One is Windows Hello for Business. So when your personal device, for instance, this is of course valid for corporate devices with Azure AD as well, is that you sign in with the PIN, right? So your device gets enrolled in Windows Hello for Business. Then you set up a PIN, and then you sign in with the PIN, and then you authenticate to your mailbox, right? Or on any other cloud services, not just your mailbox. Then the second one is you use the Microsoft Authenticator in case you move on to a different computer or which doesn't have Windows Hello for Business. You can leverage the Authenticator to sign in, let's say from a kiosk or some other things. And then as a third backup, I had the FIDO key I enrolled for all my accounts, which I keep, in the safe or somewhere safe. I can leverage in case none of those others work. Now, it used to be a way with the Microsoft accounts you can generate a key that you can reset your password. But if you decide to, block your password altogether, then that mechanism doesn't work. So those are, a couple of ways you can do that. Same as I said with corporate accounts. Windows Hello for Business, Microsoft Authenticator, FIDO keys. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the FIDO key you can take with you. The FIDO key also has a PIN, right? And if you lose it, of course, nobody can use it. The PIN blocks the key after a few attempts, and then it's not. For the time being or for a period of time until if you really feel like that key may be compromised in a way, you can always go back, use your Authenticator app or that computer with Windows Hello, sign in, and then remove those keys and re-add a different key in order to eliminate that challenge. All right, so protect identities with conditional access and multi-factor authentication. So this is how we enable verification of our, credentials, if you will. Before conditional access was available, we used to enable per user MFA in Azure AD, meaning that every time users have signed in, they have to perform MFA for any applications they were accessing. Now, that tended to be a little bit unproductive. So, conditional access has been added a couple of years now, probably even more than that, where you can now have much more granularity into which applications, how you prompt user for MFA, so on and so forth. And as you can see on this slide, there are many signals that are evaluated by the conditional access engine because before access is allowed. And this is actually the number one benefit that customers say that they have a reason for choosing Azure AD. Of course, there are many other good reasons, but from an access perspective, this is one of the best solutions out there. Turning on conditional access, a little more about this. When you create a new tenant in Azure AD, this is a feature that has been introduced about a year ago or so, where what we call security defaults are turned on automatically. So admins will be asked to enroll or forced to enroll for MFA before they can sign in, and then users will be also asked to enroll for MFA and use second factor authentication depending on what services they were accessed. So there are many built-in safeties, if you will, that comes with security default until the company decides to explore and implement conditional access. So these two are mutually exclusive. Part of the conditional access, we also have a way to configure policies based on the user risk. And also, part of the user risk are considered our admins as well. So if we speak about elevated privileges that would get access, hopefully our legitimate users only, then in a traditional way of managing this was to start with giving admins certain permissions and then kind of increasing those permissions over time. And then we ended up with multiple admins having multiple permissions that they did not really need. The reason I'm showing this is because the attack vector increases considerably when we have static permissions assignments. This is specifically to elevated privileges. So why is this so important? Is because we can leverage something called part of the least privilege access principle of Zero Trust, is to leverage PIM, Privilege Identity Management Service in Azure AD, to control, as we talked about a little earlier today, just-in-time access and give users just enough, permissions or administration permissions to various resources. So compared with the previous slide, now we have our admins leveraging specific permissions they asked for, and permissions being revoked after certain period of time. As you are aware, in Azure AD we have what we call role-based access control, and this is based on multiple built-in roles. There are also custom roles we can create, but these roles, the built-in roles, are leveraged with for just-in-time access and administration with PIM, meaning that users will need to request a specific permissions. The administrator, the PIM administrator, decides if they're going to be eligible or not for those permissions, and then there is an approver that approves them for the specific period of time, of course, based on how the policy is set, so they will gain access to complete their work. This can integrate with things like reporting also, but as well asking users to provide justifications for tracking purposes why they request and they need a specific role. Building up on strengthening identities, is Azure AD entitlement management. This has two main components. One is the access packages and access reviews. Access packages revolves around creating a package that includes resources, which is SharePoint sites or even OneDrives or other resources you would like to allow access to, not only your users but also guests, and assigning them a specific configuring rather a specific timeline or lifecycle for this access package. And then these access packages can be assigned or requested by users, and it is a way to manage access to resources a more efficient and organized way, rather than allowing users to share access everywhere and then being difficult to track that down, and looking at other methods to figuring out what permissions, who's having access to what, and then when do we need to revoke that particular access. That can be done also, tracking down who has access where by using access reviews, which is another component of this entitlement management, where we will look at groups of people that are members or users that are members of specific groups, and going through a process that certain people are evaluating, managers, for instance, if specific users will still need to have access or membership to those groups, and then obviously revoke their access if there is no need for that. There are other automated actions that can be taken through this access reviews, where you set the policy and you say if there is no response from these approvers, then take specific action, like revoking everyone's access that, for instance, have not signed in the past 30 days or so. So the strategies for a couple of strategies we talked about for reducing the attack of increasing the identity posture, or to enable time-bound JIT access via privileged access management, block invalid authentication via conditional access, perform lifecycle management, access to resources via entitlement management, recertify privilege using access reviews, and obviously require admins to elevate permissions when needed for sensitive apps. Now let's look at how we keep an eye on what's going on out there, right? We talked about identity protection, which is a service that leverages gigantic data sets to assess whether, using world-class machine learning, to assess whether a specific sign-in or a user as a whole is at risk. These analytics are backed by security experts, continuous evolving algorithms, global threat intelligence, right? We know where specific bot attack or botnet attacks are coming from, specific IP addresses, so on and so forth. And then real-time automated, complementing all this with real-time automation to mitigate these risks. So what is a sign-in risk? It is a likelihood that someone other than the account owner is attempting to sign in using the identity. So what does it mean? Is that someone else already knows your password, for instance. Going back to the password, eliminating password. This is another reason why passwords should be not used at all if possible. Just because that's what attackers leverage to gain access to your systems. However, identity protection is looking at the sign-ins, and based on all the intelligence behind machine learning, is determining and assigning a specific risk to a sign-in, whether it's low, medium, high. And then we can create policies to, let's say, if we detect that a user sign-in is a risk of high, then either block them or request them to do MFA. Similar way, a user risk is a likelihood that a user identity has been compromised. So in that case, we know for sure that user has been compromised, and then having a specific detection rate, if you will, of various indicators that user has been compromised, obviously based on all the sign-ins that are evaluated and so on and so forth. Then when a user, let's say, was determined that is a high risk, we will certainly want to create a policy to block access or require the users to securely reset their password. So that's what identity protection does, looking not only statically, if you will, but dynamically at various aspects of users' behaviors to determine whether their account has been compromised or somehow they could be potentially at risk. So, as I mentioned, this is a dynamic system that continuously learns. The machine learning algorithms are constantly improved based on various signals that are coming, real-time sessions, sign-ins, extended threat intelligence, like if you enable MCAS or Azure Advanced Threat Protection in your environment, those signals are fed all together and then to help with improving the scores and the false positives, if you will. Then using various ways of providing these signals through Microsoft Graph, Security Graph, and logic apps. So all these together are helping continuously improve the machine learning ecosystem. So it will prevent attacks. So when different signals are looked at, so when the machine learning makes a decision on whether there is a sign-in risk or user at risk, or looking at specific events that are detected, those are called detections. So it was detected that user had leaked credentials. This is something that's acquired from a database. There are many security collaborators out there that, or even dark web and so on and so forth, where attackers post these credentials they have stolen, and then that's leveraged by identity protection to determine whether users in your environment have potentially have their credentials leaked. Sign-in from anonymous IP addresses, it's a typical way for attackers to gain access. That's identified as a detection. Impossible travel, meaning that someone else has attempting or signed in actually from a different location within a short period of time, which is practically impossible from a travel perspective. Sign in from infected devices or IPs with suspicion activities, which are also sourced from this threat intelligence ecosystem. Sign in from unfamiliar locations, meaning that initially when identity protection start looking at users activity, then it goes into a learning period where it will actually analyze how often you sign in from a specific location and so on and so forth. So it kind of knows, these are the familiar locations these users and sign in from, and then all of a sudden they're signing in from a different location. Then that kind of triggers an alert to take a look at, see if it's illegitimate. Maybe users use the new VPN, or they have actually traveled over the weekend and signing in from a diff, which could be possible legitimate sign-ins. But those are also a good indicator that may not be the actual user signing in. So we talked about different strategies. Actually, I advanced too fast. So strategies for automatic threat response. Leverage identity protection risk-based signals in conditional access policies to block users or request them to change their password or reset. I'm sorry, or do MFA, depending on the situation. Typical policies we create are to require users to do MFA when we detect sign-in risks, and then requiring them to change their password when we suspect that an account or a user has been compromised. All right, any other questions before we move on to the strategy number 4? So all these systems are working hard for us to provide a lot of rich, actionable insights so we can use in taking some actions. Identity protections deliver the reports as far as the sign-in risks, users risks that we can leverage and perform our investigations, whether we need to take deeper action or other ways of investigating a specific event that occurs. Also leveraging other reports from cloud app security and analytics, sign-in activity logs from Azure AD, audit logs, all that are available through what we call workbooks, which you can leverage. There are built-in, if you will, workbooks or available, readily created for you, or you can build your own workbooks. So the data is there, and then you can configure automation based on various data that is available there and in these logs. Most common workbooks that you'll find there are Conditional Access, Insights, Legacy Authentication, which is what we encourage customers to use for evaluating which users are still using legacy authentication, right? We don't want to just block it overnight, but we want to get an idea of how many users and communicate, and this project may take a little bit of time. So that's why it's important to have something you can periodically look at and get an idea how you progress into eliminating these older clients that are still trying to access email and provide upgrade paths for them for mobile apps or desktop apps and so on and so forth. Azure services, they integrate natively with our security solutions like Azure Sentinel or Azure Security Center, where you can also have built-in dashboards, reports, workbooks, if you will, that will show you various aspects of your security posture, if you will. From this particular dashboard, you can see sign-ins, status, sign-ins by application, by device, and you can drill down from there and even get to a list of specific users that can you identify as potentially having too many sign-ins in a very short period of time. So Azure Sentinel is our SIEM system, cloud-based, which is not only integrated with Azure AD, as these reports show from the Azure AD sign-ins perspective, but it integrates with Office 365 unified logging, if you will, and pulling in data and analyzing data and providing alerting, as well as integrating with Security Center on the Azure ecosystem side, where it's looking at security posture, providing recommendations to even alerts that can be forwarded to Azure Sentinel. They have a single pane of glass from a security investigation perspective. So as a summary, alerts can be configured to be sent via email or other notifications. It is important that we watch those emails and take remediation actions. For instance, someone has requested an elevated access. You probably want to know why. Of course, there is an approval process to that, but as a general practice, some periodic reviews of this will help identify potentially any unwanted elevations, if you will, of certain accounts. Then checking your identity secure score, that's available on the Azure AD portal specifically, but it's part of the overall Microsoft security score, and it can be visualized as an integral part or separately on a different dashboard, along with secure score for other services. Monitoring your Azure AD audit and signing logs. Those are two separate logs. One is for any changes that happen to objects in Azure AD. The other one is obviously for signing in. Then strengthen your conditional access or security posture or identities using conditional access policies and privilege identity management, which inside reports are available. For instance, to identify, if you're just starting with privilege identity management, you want to know how many admins or which admins are in which roles, and then kind of start your strategy and planning from there. And then you can create your own dashboard using Azure AD workbooks. All right, any other questions as we are going to tackle strategy number 5? So empowering users with self-service tools not only helps us or administrators relieve a lot of duties they otherwise may have to do on behalf of the users, and tasks that users can perform themselves or better suited for users to do it themselves. Single sign-on is provided to the also provided through what we call the My Apps portal, where users assigned to various applications in Azure AD have automatically populated various icons which represent the applications they need to access. So My Apps portal, signing once and then doing single sign-on across all these applications, where you can launch them. On the same portal, you have other options there to go and update your security information, like you want to add an authenticator app or a new phone number, or you want to reset your password, and so on and so forth. So it's a one-stop for users to perform self-administrative tasks. It is also available a way for users from the My Sign In page. There are a couple of tabs. Once you explore the security related tabs from the My Apps portal, you can just navigate directly to this particular page called mysignins.microsoft.com or myaccount.microsoft.com. Then for there, you will have access to various aspects. The security info I mentioned, you can go and update that. But also, very important, you can see your own sign-ins or someone else's sign-in if that was the case. And then you can report that this wasn't me. This triggers an alert. And then administrators can, or if there are policies in place, then your access will be blocked from that particular IP address that's listed here, if that was not, a legitimate user. We talked about access reviews, how they help with identifying existing access, and then taking actions based on the delegation of who will manage these reviews. There is a way you can assign specific reviewers or managers of a specific group of people, and you can review apps, you can review groups, memberships, and then take the necessary actions there. So strategies we talked about for self-service, password reset, updating security information, application access, also including self-reporting of unauthorized access, maintaining compliance of your or access to resources by using Azure AD access reviews, create access packages with entitlement management, to allow access to resources, of course, for specifying a specific period of time. You can extend access packages if need be for various projects, and then train users to how self-report sign-in risk is, which the machine learning or the algorithms and all the systems behind evaluating these sign-ins will learn that, let's say, that particular IP may be malicious if you say reporting that someone signed in with my credentials from an IP, a specific IP. So our 5 strategies approach is to strengthen your credentials. We talked about how we do that, right? Windows Hello for Business, Authenticator app, FIDO keys, reducing the attack surface by blocking legacy authentication first. That's very important. Automating threat response with implementing risk policies based on identity protection, increasing your awareness by auditing and monitoring this. You can do it at an individual workloads level, or you can send all the alerts to a SIM system. Sentinel is our SIM system, and also enable self-help for more predictable and complete user security. And with that, we came to an end. Thank you for listening, and I hope this was useful. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Adrian? I'll go ahead and stop the recording.